All right, let's dive right into this, because what's been happening in Dallas during this off-season is one of those things that could either fly completely under the radar or a year from now be the kind of moves people look back on and say, how did they get away with that? Last season, we talked about how the Cowboys managed to make some low-cost signings and acquisitions that ended up bringing them real value. And this year feels like a déjà vu moment. Only this time, the focus is on the defensive side of the ball. And it's not about volume. It's about two specific players who have shown in training camp and preseason that they could be sneaky, high-impact additions without the Cowboys having to give up anything close to a premium price to get them done now. Before we get too deep into the breakdown, let's acknowledge what this means in the bigger picture. The Cowboys are coming into the 2025 season with the same pressure they seem to face every year. High expectations, the talent to compete, but a fan base that's been burned too many times to just blindly buy in. And yet moves like these are exactly the kind of roster decisions that can quietly make the difference between a good team and one that can survive the injuries, the depth challenges, and the grind a long season. These two players, Kay Elam and Donovan Ezeraku, are not just names you toss on the depth chart. They're guys who, for different reasons, were considered question marks elsewhere, but are now looking like they could fill critical roles in Dallas. And when you're not paying star-level money or giving up high draft capital, the margin for success becomes much easier to hit. Let's start with Kay Elam, because his story is almost tailor-made for one of those change-of-scenery narratives. Elam came out of Florida as a first-round pick for the Buffalo Bills. He had the size, the athleticism, and the draft pedigree to be a long-term starter, maybe even a Pro Bowl-level corner in the right system. But in Buffalo, it just never clicked. Whether it was the scheme, the coaching fit, or just a confidence spiral after a few rough games, he found himself sliding down the depth chart and labeled as one of those maybe he's just not that guy players. That's the kind of situation where a front office either moves on or a team like Dallas steps in, sees the potential, and says we can fix that. And here's the thing. Since arriving in Dallas, Elam has looked like a different player. Training camp. Reports have him consistently standing out. Not as the guy who gets beat and needs extra attention from coaches, but as someone holding his own, breaking up passes, and stepping into the number one corner role when injuries sideline other starters. This isn't just about raw talent. This is about confidence. Playing cornerback in the NFL is as much mental as it is physical. You have to have a borderline irrational belief in yourself because you will get beat, and you have to line back up the next play and act like it never happened. Elam's regained swagger in Dallas might be the single biggest reason he's suddenly flashing the potential that got him drafted in the first place. From a front office standpoint, this move was almost death. The Cowboys essentially executed a late-round pick swap to get him day 3 value for a player who at his ceiling could be an above-average starter. Even if he's just league average, that's still a win considering the price. Compare that to drafting a developmental corner who might not even make the roster. And it's a no-brainer. With guys like Trayvon Diggs working back from injury and other corners dealing with their own availability issues, Dallas doesn't just want Elam to be good. They need him to be good. And if he is, the defense's depth immediately goes from a concern to a strength. Then there's Donovan Ezeraku, the rookie edge rusher out of Boston College. And this one is a completely different kind of acquisition. Whereas Elam was a low-cost flyer on a player who needed a reset, Ezeraku was an intentional draft target, someone the Cowboys clearly liked during the scouting process and were thrilled to land in the second round. The man was a monster in his final season at Boston College. Over 16 sacks, more than 60 quarterback pressures, and the kind of bend and explosiveness off the edge that just doesn't come around every day. He's not just an athlete. He's a finisher, the type of pass rusher who can turn pressure into actual game-changing plays. The Cowboys coaching staff seems genuinely excited about what he brings. And even though he's still figuring out his go-to-pass rush move at the NFL level, the traits are all there. His preseason tape has shown flashes, not just rushing the passer, but holding up against the run, which is often the biggest hurdle for young edge players. He's got the frame, the motor, and the work ethic to be a year-one contributor, even if he's not getting starter-level snaps right away. When you line him up alongside MICAH Parsons, Dante Fowler, Sam Williams, and the rest of that rotation, you suddenly see how dangerous this front can be. Parsons will draw double teams. Offenses will have to account for the veterans, and that leaves a guy like Ezra with one-on-one opportunities he's athletic enough to win. And let's talk value again, because that's the theme here. Ezra was the 28th player on some draft boards, and Dallas got him at pick 44. That's a legitimate steal in terms of where he could have gone versus where they actually got him. It's been a while since the Cowboys landed a high-round player who perfectly matched both their need and their board ranking without having to trade up or overpay. That usually bodes as well for future production. The player comparison coming out of college was Harold Landry. Similar build, similar college production, and Landry went on to put up multiple 9-sack seasons in the NFL. If Ezra even comes close to that trajectory, Dallas will have nailed this pick. The beauty of having both Elam and Ezra in the fold is that they represent two very different but equally important strategies for building a winning roster. Elam is the classic reclamation project. Minimal investment, high upside, and no real downside if it doesn't work. Ezra is the targeted draft investment. A young player with elite traits who fits the team's long-term vision. Both can be meaningful contributors this season, but their real value might come in the seasons ahead, when their contracts are still team-friendly and their production has the potential to be well above what they're being paid. If you're looking for reasons to be optimistic about the Cowboys' defense in 2025, these two players should be near the top of your list. They don't have to be superstars right away. Elam just needs to be steady, competent, and ready when called upon. Ezra needs to keep developing, learning from the veterans, and taking advantage of the favorable matchups he's going to get. If both do that, this defense won't just be good. It could be one of the deepest, most versatile units in the league. And in the NFL, where injuries and attrition are inevitable, that depth is often what separates teams that fade in December from the ones still playing in January. What makes this whole thing even more intriguing is the timing. The Cowboys are in a phase where their core is established. The stars are set. MICAH Parsons is the alpha on defense. CeeDee Lamb is the top weapon on offense. The offensive line has a foundation that's been built over years, but that also means the margin for error when building around those stars gets smaller. You cannot afford to swing and miss too often on the supporting cast because every wasted roster spot is a gap that opposing teams will find and exploit. That's why Elam and Ezra matter so much more than just being interesting players. They are potential answers to two of the most expensive and volatile areas in football: quality, quarterback depth, and consistent edge rushing. When you think about the Cowboys' history in recent seasons, there's been this frustrating pattern of getting thin at key positions just when things start to matter most. Injuries at corner have derailed playoff pushes. The pass rush has looked dominant at times, but then gone cold when there's no consistent pressure outside of Parsons. And when that happens, you start seeing the ripple effects. The secondary having to hold longer in coverage, linebackers getting exposed, and the entire defensive rhythm breaking down. The front office knows this. That's why you see them making these surgical moves instead of just going for splashy headline-grabbing signings. It's not about hype. It's about sustainability over a 17-game season and beyond. Elam's situation is particularly fascinating because the narrative on him was starting to solidify into something that's hard for young players to shake. Once the league starts to label you as struggling or not developing, it can stick no matter how much talent you actually have. That's why Dallas might have been the perfect landing spot. The scheme fits him better. The locker room isn't looking at him as the guy who failed somewhere else. They're looking at him as the guy who can help them win right now. That's a huge shift in energy, and you can see it in the way he's been playing. It's not perfect. No quarterback's camp ever is, but it's consistent, and consistency is exactly what the Cowboys need from that position opposite their starters. Then there's the psychological aspect. Cornerback is one of those positions where confidence can spike or collapse in a single game. Get beat deep twice, and suddenly you're second-guessing every move. But string together a few strong practices and preseason reps, and suddenly you're playing with the freedom that lets you take risks and make plays. Elam seems to be leaning toward the latter. That's a good sign not just for him individually. On the other side of this equation, Ezraku's transition is more about proving that the skill set he dominated with in college translates against NFL-caliber competition. Boston College is not exactly a pass rusher factory, which means when a player puts up the kind of numbers he did, scouts have to dig deeper. Is it scheme? Is it level of competition? Or is it a genuine reflection of FL traits? The Cowboys clearly landed on that last answer. And so far, there's been nothing to suggest they were wrong. Even in limited preseason action, he's shown he can get off the line quickly, bend around tackles without losing balance, and chase plays down from the backside. Those are traits that don't depend on the opponent. They work at every level of football. What's going to be key for Ezra early in his career is how he fits into the rotation. Dallas has the luxury of not throwing him into a starter or bust role. Instead, they can deploy him situationally, give him snaps when the offense is in passing situations, and let him learn the nuances of NFL blocking schemes without having to carry the weight of being the every down guy. That's a development path that has worked well for other young pass rushers in Dallas. And if he follows it, by the time the second half of the season rolls around, he could be playing a much bigger role in some of the most important games on the schedule. And there's also the ripple effect that adding someone like Ezraku can have on the rest of the defense. MICAH Parsons, for all his dominance, has faced more and more double teams and chip blocks each year. That's natural. When you're the guy who can wreck a game plan single-handedly, teams are going to spend all week figuring out how to stop you. But if you have a legitimate second or third rusher who can win one-on-ons, that calculus changes. Offenses are forced to play it straighter. Protection schemes have to stay honest. And suddenly Parsons is freed up to attack with fewer bodies. In his way, it's the same principle we've seen on elite defenses for years. One superstar becomes exponentially more dangerous when there's another threat across from him. The other thing to keep in mind is contract control. Both Elam and Ezra are cost control for the next few years. That matters in a big way for a team that's already got major money tied up in stars and will need to navigate tricky cap situations in the near future. If they can get solid to above average production from those two without having to invest big dollars, it frees up the flexibility to address other needs or lock down other key players. It's the kind of roster building that doesn't make headlines, but ends up being the difference in sustaining a competitive window. For Elam, the challenge will be proving that what we're seeing in camp isn't just a hot streak, but the start of a steady climb toward the player he was projected to becoming. Out of Florida. For Ezra, it's about translating flashes into production, pressures into sacks, tackles into drive-ending plays. Neither has to be perfect, and neither is being asked to carry the defense. But both are in situations where their success will ripple out and make everyone around them better. If this works, in 2 years, we might be talking about Elam as one of the league's better bargain trades and Ezra as the latest homegrown pass rusher to rise through Dallas' system. That's the kind of outcome that turns a good team into a dangerous one. And considering how much of the Cowboys' recent playoff exits have come down to depth issues or defensive lapses at the worst possible time, these moves could end up being exactly the kind of quiet turning point that fans only truly appreciate in hindsight. But before we continue, Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Dallas Cowboys. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. The NFL world was shaken late last night when whispers began to circulate that MICAH Parsons, the Dallas Cowboys defensive superstar, had officially announced his departure from the franchise. While neither the Cowboys nor Parsons have released a formal press statement, multiple sources close to the situation claim that the 25-year-old linebacker was presented with an irresistible offer from an undisclosed team believed to be outside the NFC East. The rumor mill has been buzzing for weeks about possible tensions between Parsons and the Dallas front office, stemming from contract extension negotiations that reportedly stalled earlier this offseason. Some insiders suggest that the offer placed on the table was not just about money, but also about providing Parsons a more prominent role in a defensive scheme tailored to his unique skill set. As one unnamed executive put it, MICAH has always wanted to be more than just a piece of the puzzle. He wants to be the cornerstone. Fans across social media have been in uproar with hashtags like #Parsons Redacted trending within hours, fueling speculation about where he could be heading next and whether the Cowboys' championship hopes just took a massive, perhaps irreversible, hit before the season even begins. The shock surrounding Parsons' potential exit from Dallas lies not only in his on-field value, but in the symbolic blow it would deliver to a franchise that has long marketed itself as America's team. Parsons, drafted in the first round of 2021, quickly became one of the most feared defensive players in the league, racking up sacks, quarterback pressures, and game-changing plays at a rate that turned him into the face of the Cowboys' defense. For fans, his departure feels almost unthinkable, akin to removing the heart from a team built on defensive swagger. Yet, several league analysts have pointed out that Dallas has quietly been preparing for a future without him, noting the increased snaps given to younger linebackers during training camp and the scouting of edge rushers in recent months. One particularly telling detail emerged from a source within the Cowboys facility. Parsons had reportedly cleared out his locker earlier this week, though team representatives insisted it was merely for equipment reorganization. Whether this is damage control or truth remains to be seen. Still, the sense of finality in the air has left even the most optimistic Cowboy supporters wondering if the team is entering a new uncertain chapter, one without the player many consider to be their defensive engine. Adding intrigue to the unfolding drama is the nature of the mysterious offer itself. The figures being whispered are staggering, reportedly exceeding $150 million over 5 years with guarantees that would set a new market standard for defensive players. Beyond the money, sources claim the proposal includes a leadership role that Parsons has coveted, involving direct input into defensive strategy and personnel decisions. Such an arrangement is rare in the NFL, but not unprecedented for generational talents whose influence stretches beyond their athletic performance. If true, this would mean the receiving team is not only betting on Parsons' current dominance, but also on his vision for shaping their future. Interestingly, several insiders have hinted that the franchise making this move is desperate for a defensive identity, suggesting that they see Parsons as the missing piece to elevate them into championship contention. While speculation continues about which city he might soon call home, whispers point toward a major market team with deep pockets and a recent history of high-profile signings. The secrecy surrounding negotiations has only added to the suspense, with some insiders joking that the NFL is turning into a Hollywood thriller, and that fans should be prepared for an announcement that will dominate headlines for weeks. Meanwhile, in Dallas, the reaction within a locker room is described as a mix of disbelief and quiet acceptance. Several players, speaking on condition of anonymity, admitted that they had sensed Parsons' frustration over the past season, particularly during the team's playoff exit, when he was reportedly seen having an intense exchange with members of the coaching staff. While teammates have been quick to publicly praise his professionalism, the private sentiment seems to acknowledge that a parting of ways might ultimately be best for both sides. For the Cowboys front office, the challenge now lies in managing the narrative, ensuring fans remain engaged and optimistic while avoiding the appearance of losing control over their roster. Head coach Mike McCarthy has unsurprisingly dodged direct questions, insisting that our focus is on the guys in this building, a statement that many reporters interpret as an admission that Parsons' departure is inevitable. The media frenzy has been relentless, with every training camp snap, sideline conversation, and cryptic social media posts from Parsons being dissected in real time. The uncertainty has created an atmosphere of both anticipation and dread as the Cowboys brace for a seismic shift that could redefine the franchise for years to come. If Parsons does indeed leave, the ripple effect will extend far beyond the Cowboys' defense. His absence would force Dallas to reconsider its entire strategic approach, potentially shifting emphasis toward a more offense-driven identity to compensate for the loss of its most dynamic defender. For opposing teams, the prospect of facing a Cowboys squad without Parsons is undoubtedly appealing. But his arrival elsewhere could immediately tilt the balance of power within the league. Imagine a contender on the verge of greatness suddenly adding one of the NFL's most disruptive forces to their roster. The implications are staggering. Such a move could alter playoff landscapes, influence free agency decisions, and even impact draft strategies in the years ahead. Of course, there remains the slim possibility